That Friday night was the most emotionally profound and unforgettable evening of my life. The house had settled into a deep, resonant quiet, a stark contrast to the usual hum of daily life. And within that stillness, I felt a rare and precious sense of calm. I was utterly drained from a long week of work and responsibilities, my only desire to surrender to the oblivion of sleep. As I lay in the dark, I remember thinking nothing could possibly pierce, laugh even on the hardest days, and a kindness that seemed to radiate from him. But the weight of being both mother and father, provider and comforter was a constant heavy cloak I wore. That night I was so spent I barely managed to change into my pajamas before collapsing into bed. The silence was absolute. Daniel had gone to bed hours earlier after finishing his homework and a video game session. Finally, in the sanctity of my room, I was alone. Moonlight filtered through the thin curtains, painting soft, shifting silhouettes on the walls. I pulled the blanket close, savoring its warmth, and let my mind drift. Life had found a gentle rhythm lately, a welcome peace after several difficult years of adjustment. Daniel and I had built a good, stable life together in the aftermath. Even though he was nearly 20, on the cusp of manhood, we remained a knock on the door exceptionally close. He was a thoughtful, caring young man, and sometimes I worry he shouldered much emotional responsibility for someone his age. A smile touched my lips as I thought of him, but exhaustion quickly pulled me under a tide of heaviness. Then I heard it, a soft, almost tentative knock on my bedroom door. I stirred, believing it to be a fragment of a dream, but it came again, a gentle but persistent sound. Mom, Daniel's voice was quiet, yet it pulled me fully awake. I blinked, my eyes adjusting to see his outline framed in the dim hallway light. "Daniel, what's wrong?" I asked, my voice thick with sleep. He hesitated before entering, closing the door quietly behind him. I couldn't sleep," he said, his gaze fixed on the floor. I felt an immediate pang of concern. This was more than simple insomnia. Since the divorce, Daniel had occasional bouts of restless nights, but he rarely spoke of them. I knew his father's absence had hurt him more than he ever let on. And tonight, a profound sadness seemed to cling to him. "Come here," I said softly, patting the space beside me. "You can stay with me tonight if you want." He paused, then crossed the room and lay down, facing me. In the faint light, he looked both tired and strikingly vulnerable, a side he seldom showed. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked gently. He shook his head, dark hair falling across his forehead. "No, I just wanted to be close to you." My heart swelled with a familiar protective warmth. It had been years since he'd sought physical comfort like this, the unspoken guilt reminiscent of when he was a small boy frightened by a storm. I reached out and brushed his hair back. "That's okay," I whispered. "Stay as long as you need." He offered a faint smile, but a shadow remained in his eyes, a silent turmoil he wasn't ready to voice. I didn't press. Instead, I lay back, pulled the blanket over us both, and let the quiet comfort us. His breathing gradually steadied, and I thought he'd fallen asleep until he spoke, his voice so soft it was almost lost. "Mom, do you ever miss him?" The question, after all this time, surprised me. I knew he meant his father. "I do sometimes," I admitted, choosing my words carefully. "But things weren't right between us, Daniel. You know that." He nodded. But I sensed he needed more. "Do you ever think things could have been different?" He asked. I sighed, a wave of old regrets momentarily surfacing. Maybe, but we can't change the past. We can only move forward from where we are. Daniel looked down, fidgeting with the blanket's edge. "I guess. I just wonder if maybe I could have done something different. Like, if I had been better." His words pierced me. I sat up, turning to face him directly. "Daniel, no. This was not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong." He glanced away, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Sometimes it feels like if I had been better, maybe Dad wouldn't have left." Tears sprang to my eyes as I pulled him into a tight embrace. He stiffened for a second, then melted, burying his face in my shoulder. "Listen to me," I said, my voice trembling with conviction. Your dad made his own choices. They had nothing to do with you. It was never your responsibility. You have always been more than enough. For me, you are everything to me." He nodded against my shoulder, and I felt some of the tension leave his body as he drifted into sleep. But as he slept peacefully beside me, was it my fault? Own mind raced. I was overwhelmed by a surge of empathy and love, but also by a profound recognition of his pain, a pain I hadn't fully seen. Holding my nearly grown son, I felt a deep, resonant connection, the timeless bond of a parent and child, but also a sharp ache for the boy who had shouldered an invisible guilt. The warmth I felt was the fierce, protective love of a mother who finally understood the depth of her child's wound. It wasn't unfamiliar. It was the core of my being, now amplified with a new clarity and purpose. Morning came gently. Daniel still slept, his face relaxed. Slipping out, I made breakfast, the routine a grounding force. My thoughts, however, were on our conversation. The guilt he carried was a burden I was determined to help him dismantle. When he emerged, sleeps, there was a softer quality. To him. "Thanks for last night, Mom," he said over pancakes, his vulnerability now in the open. I needed that. "You never have to thank me," I said, my heart full. The day passed normally, but a new layer of understanding had been woven between us. That evening, we watched a movie on the couch. In the dim light, I was simply content to be near him. Halfway through, he shifted, his arm resting against mine. It was a simple, casual contact, but it spoke of a comfort and trust that had been reaffirmed. I reached over and took his hand, giving it a firm, reassuring squeeze. He squeezed back a silent acknowledgement of our talk, of our bond, of the healing that had begun. We sat like that, mother and son, connected not by dependency, but by mutual respect and hard-won love. As the credits rolled, I leaned my head against his shoulder. "I'm really glad you're here," he whispered. "Me too, Daniel," I said. "Me too." In the following weeks, we talked more openly about the past, about his feelings, about my own. I encouraged him to explore these emotions with a counselor, which he did. Our relationship deepened, but into something even stronger and healthier, an adult connection between a mother and a son who could see each other clearly without ghosts or guilt. The intimacy of that Friday night wasn't the beginning of a blurring of lines, but a crucial moment of clarity. It was the catalyst that allowed us to finally see the unhealed scars and choose to heal them together, strengthening the true, enduring, and appropriate bond that had always been our foundation. We learned that the purest form of love sometimes requires not just affection, but the courage to face hard truths and the wisdom to foster growth within the sacred space of family. The healing was not a linear path, but a series of conscious choices. The raw vulnerability of that Friday night had opened a door, but it was up to us to decide what crossed the threshold. In the clear light of day, the intensity of that shared loneliness transformed into a different kind of energy. A mutual determination to build a future not defined by an absence, but by the wholeness we could cultivate separately together. I began to gently redirect our dynamic. The love was never in question. It was the vast, unwavering sea upon which we sailed. But I realized I had been letting our boat drift, comforted by the familiar solitude of our shared vessel.